Hi there, and welcome to Open, the show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm Gary Axelbank, sitting in for Kib and Aline, and today we'll update you on what's happening in and around our borough of the Bronx. Coming up as we start the new year, we'll take a look back at a previous interview done by my colleague, Kib and Aline. This segment features the world's first HIV positive to HIV positive heart transplant recipient and the transplant cardiologist, and it contains a message of why it's important to be an organ donor. Then after that, we'll take a look at some of our wonderful BronxNet news stories to see what our reporters have been up to. And after that, as rent continually increases, the organization StreetEasy found that wages are decreasing, creating the widest economic gap since the 2008 financial crisis. An economist from StreetEasy joins us to discuss how this will affect all of us here in New York. Are New Yorkers dealing with the economic effects of the pandemic still? And finally, millions of Americans still struggle to gain access to high-speed internet. The organization Consumer Reports conducted research collecting 22,000 internet bills to find out why. A senior policy counsel for Consumer Reports will join us to discuss how will the fight for a fair internet solve the problem. So stay tuned, all this and much more headed your way, because now we are officially open. Hey everybody, I'm Gary Axelbank filling in for Kib and Aline. Today is Tuesday, January 10th, and you are now watching Open, a program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. As we start the new year, we'll take a look back at a previous interview done by Kib and Aline. This segment features the world's first HIV positive to HIV positive heart transplant recipient and also the transplant cardiologist. And they'll have a message of why it's important to be an organ donor. Let's take a look.
Now, the world's first HIV positive to HIV positive heart transplant has been successfully performed at Montefiore Health System, right here in the Bronx. Doctor, can you just tell me a little bit more about this remarkable story?
Yeah, sure. I know Marion through our heart failure clinic. When I started seeing her, she was already listed for a kidney transplantation. And at one point, she actually received an offer for a kidney donor. But in the process of being listed for the kidney, and she was receiving dialysis, her heart had begun to fail. And we had used other measures such as putting stents in her arteries of the heart medications, but the heart function was continuing to get worse. And it became pretty clear that she would not safely be able to go the kidney only without a heart transplant. So we listed her for both heart and kidney transplantation. The barrier, with these transplants is that there's a severe organ shortage. So it's hard enough trying to get one organ, the kidney, but when you combine it with two organs, with heart and kidney, it becomes even more difficult. So Marion was listed for heart and kidney transplantation on the wait list, but she wasn't getting any offers. And fortunately, our program, one of the only two active programs that can do this. There's others that potentially can, but we're one of the two active ones, because we have a lot of history of transplanting patients that have a history of HIV with non-HIV donors. We've done that in the prior decade successfully. We were able to meet the criteria, and then me and Marion had a discussion about this, about the risks and benefits, and we felt that this would be a very safe thing to do, and she consented to it. And we felt once we do this, she will be the only person that will be eligible to receive such an organ. Nobody else, no competition, first in line. So once we activated this pathway of receiving a HIV positive donor heart, which hasn't been done before, but once we did activate it, within a few days, fortunately, the appropriate offer came. and our center carefully evaluated it. There's a whole team of doctors. I'm just one of them. Infectious doctors, critical care doctors, heart surgeons, critical care physicians, a lot of doctors. We evaluated the organs and we proceeded with transplantation, and it was successful. She's received a normal heart, a normal kidney, and as you can see, she's doing very well. We're very happy how things
Right.
turned out.
I want to ask Miriam, how did you feel knowing this procedure was possible?
Initially, it was very scary, but I knew that I had to take the chance, and I had faith in Dr. Saeed and Montefiore Einstein. And it was literally my only opportunity with a second chance in life. The waiting list is so long that I didn't think it would be possible for me to get a heart or a kidney via the normal transplant list. My only opportunity for a second chance was through the Hope Book.
Now, doctor, can you explain what were the possible risks, when you're doing such a procedure like this one?
Yeah, great question. So, as with anything that hasn't been done before, there are risks. Sometimes there are risks that we can't necessarily think of, but to the best of our ability, we felt that this would be a safe thing to do, because you have to understand when the organs are being evaluated for transplant, before the transplant, we look at the heart function very carefully through multiple different methods. So that's not different in this case. But one potential risk was the idea of medications, that the HIV medications may have an interaction with the heart transplant medications. So we anticipated that, and our team, before any of this was done, looked at all the medications that Miriam would be on afterwards, and we made sure that it would be no interactions. So that was something that went according to plan. A lot of transplant medicine is what happens during the transplant and after the transplant, and those things we felt wouldn't be different in this case, even though the organ is coming from somebody HIV positive. But as long as these are normal organs, which we can judge beforehand, the process of transplant and afterward is just based on team expertise and everybody working together, and that's what we do all the time. So we felt we were more than capable of doing this. It was really, a lot of this was Miriam being very brave and this extraordinary act of compassion on behalf of the donor family that allowed this to happen.
Now, I want to ask you, how does it feel for you to be part of a life-changing procedure?
Me?
Hmm.
Oh my God. I am so grateful to be able to show individuals like me that are suffering from heart failure or even kidney failure that there's a second chance in life. Also, very grateful and thankful for the Newton family, for Brittany. She was a donor being HIV positive. And if it wasn't for Brittany, I probably would not be here today. So she afforded me a second chance in life, and that I will be forever grateful and thankful for, to her and to her family, which has now become my family as well. Faith and her generosity allowed me to have a new life today.
And you recently got to actually, meet her family. What was that experience like?
And that experience was very emotional and very beautiful. I know they lost a loved one, so there was a lot of emotions there. But for me, their loved ones live in me, and I just felt this natural connection with them. And today we constantly texting each other, talking to each other. Just got a new extended family, and for that, again, I'm so very blessed and so very thankful that they afforded me a second opportunity in life.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really beautiful. Now, doctor, I want to start with you, but it's a question for both of you, actually. How does this procedure change the outlook society has on ideas with life with HIV?
Yes. So there's a feeling out there that because somebody has HIV, that they are immunosuppressed to begin with, and the HIV itself is the major risk factor. Now, this is on some level true, but the treatment for HIV, as we all know, has come a long way, right? It's no longer this severe disease acutely. There's medications now that can control the problem, and it becomes more of a chronic medical problem, and people live with it okay, and the medications are fairly advanced now. But this feeling still exists that transplanting somebody with HIV that's already immunosuppressed, and then now you're going to immunosuppress them further with the heart transplant meds, could be a dangerous thing to do. So that's there's resistance out there, but it's been done. Our center has been doing it for the last decade. We've done many patients with HIV, with the HIV negative donors, and those transplants have gone successfully. And there's reports, experiences of the whole country that show that the survival after transplantation, heart transplantation for patients with HIV, is actually similar to those without HIV. So that one barrier in this case, again, shows us that this is very feasible with good success. Number two, now taking a donor with HIV, I think this opens up another door exclusively for patients with HIV to receive these organs that otherwise wouldn't be used. This is a very shortage. There's a big shortage of donors. There's over 100,000 people listed for organs, and time is of the essence. The longer a person waits, the greater risk they're at, and we lose a person on the list about every hour. So we have to move quickly. And this pathway provides us just another door that we could open and take these organs in a safe way.
Now, Miriam, I want to ask actually, after you having this experience, why would you say it's important or how would you encourage people to become organ donors?
I encourage everyone, even myself now, I know I can be an organ donor. Before, I think there's a lot of ignorance as far as people with HIV, whether they could donate or not. And we can. So, and there's people, like Dr. Saeed said, many of us, are on the list for years and years, and there's just not enough. And to save someone's life or to give someone life so they can spend more time with their families, more time with their children, it's a form of love. And I really believe that in today's world, we need all the love we can get. So organ donations is very important. If I don't need my organs, why not give it to someone that can benefit from it in order for them to have a second chance in life? And they carry on your legacy as well. So it's a win situation, in my opinion, for both the receiver and the donor.
Now, doctor, what should people know? What should people know just in general when becoming a donor?
Yeah, number one, a person has to think about this. It's not something that could be done immediately. So, as Mariam was saying, it's a gift of life. Really, despite whichever organ it is, every organ for a person waiting for them is life-saving. Whether it's a kidney, a liver, a heart, there's many organs that can be transplanted. So, for donors, they have to think about this. What their wishes would be if they got into a situation where they could donate. And then there's the logistics. In the U.S., it's more of a opt-in system. So you have to, if those are your wishes, you have to sign up for it. And there are several ways of doing that. One method is through the DMV. There are several other pathways as well. But I think it's important to think about this beforehand, where this is truly a life-saving thing to do for another person. Remarkable, what effect it can have on a person's life.
And I also quickly just want to know, I think it's a misconception about organ donating. Is it something that you can only do when you've passed on, or is it something that you can do while you're alive and well? Can you just clarify some things on that?
Sure. So this again depends on the organ that's being donated. Clearly, with heart transplantation, if a person has passed on and their wishes are to help somebody else. But in the case of other organs, could be a live donor, such as kidney, and people donate skin, other organs. So those don't have to be passing away.
Also, I just want to thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing this remarkable story.
Thank you for having us, and Merry Christmas. It's been a blessing to be able to see another one. Thank you, Dr. Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having us on, and happy holidays. Thank you.
To stay connected with Montefiore, please go to their website at www.montefiore.org, or you could follow them on social media on all platforms at Montefiore Health System.
It's a touching and, dare I say, heartwarming story. The BronxNet team would like to thank Dr. Omar Saeed and Miriam Nieves for sharing the amazing story with us and you too. We'll have to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Open right after this.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut, the one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink, or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking, now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed, better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead, catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner! Go?
Excellent. Soccer. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the I thought you were on my team. Kids!
I don't want to talk about it.
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 Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency.
Kids, you all right?
This family's prepared. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan. Go to nyc.gov/readyny or call 311 for more information.
Okay, welcome back. We'd like to take the time right now to highlight the wonderful news stories that my colleagues at BronxNet, the reporters and videographers, have put together. So, take a look.
From singing songs to lighting the menorah, the Bronx Hanukkah celebration is officially underway here at the Riverdale Y.
The season of Hanukkah and the holiday season is a time to reaffirm our commitment to our community, to our faith, to our family.
With the rise in anti-Semitism, the Hanukkah celebration is a time to embrace Jewish tradition and combat hate with love.
And so it's important for us to always stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters during the good and the bad times.
In the face of rising anti-Semitism, I love proudly displaying that I am Jewish. And my favorite tradition on Hanukkah is to light the candles with my family and display the menorah in our windowsill.
As a center that serves the Riverdale community with children to senior residents, CEO Melissa Sigmund and board president Peter Goldman feel it is especially important to bring leaders of different faith and organizations together during this time.
So one of the core values here at the Y is really to build and strengthen our community. And for me, it's so important and essential that we bring together leaders of different faiths, of different organizations.
We're very much interested in bringing all parts of the Bronx community together to learn from and about one another.
Reporting for BronxNet, Jonathan Calixto.
We are here at Montefiere's Moses campus. We are joining Montefiore Medleys. This singing group uses the technique of singing to help patients recover from strokes and other neurological disorders.
We're here today to celebrate the holidays, of course, and bring together some of our patients who have suffered neurological insults in the hope of singing together as a group, as a choir, to improve their expressive language and their communication.
Ricardo is a resident for physical medicine rehab who was a doctor in Colombia for 8 years. But here's a little fun fact. He is also a trained opera singer.
I really enjoy singing, so one of the main objectives that I have in residency is to pursue performing arts medicine, which is just how we help artists and singers and dancers in a way of rehabilitation.
We was fortunate enough to speak to a patient and survivor of a stroke. Dwight gives other survivors some encouraging words.
Be patient. Do not be bothered about other people, be patient and you will find your way around.
To find out how you can join and be a help to a stroke survivor, visit www.montefiore.org and click on Newsroom to find out how and when you can sign up for these singing sessions. For BronxNet, this is Kyrie Moody.
And just like that, professional wrestling made its way back to the Boogie Down with a premiere show titled Welcome to the Bronx, presented by local wrestling company We Are Wrestling at St. Helena's Church.
Professional wrestling has not been in the Bronx in over 3 years. And I'm a Bronx kid, born here, raised here my whole life, 30 plus years here in the Bronx. And so for me, to bring wrestling back to the Bronx is a major, major step.
The sold-out show featured a lineup roster of national and local wrestlers. For the Bronx-bred wrestlers who mainly perform and train outside of their home borough, this premiere event felt like a homecoming.
To be able to give what I do with my heart and my soul and my art back to the community, being here at St. Helena's, which is the elementary school that I went to, is so special to me. It's inspiring. I hope to touch as many people as I can with this story and with what I do here.
There's not a lot of people from Kingsbridge doing what they're doing out here. For the neighborhood, either playing basketball, baseball, the usual stuff, or you're on the streets. Doing professional wrestling is something that I've always wanted to do, and I feel like there's a lot of people like me who's out there that don't know how to get into this or are ashamed to do it. So with me being one of the top 500 wrestlers in the world, I'm showing people this is what you can do. So it feels great to be here.
This is where I started 5 years ago. Today's my anniversary for wrestling, and it's gonna be a crazy show. I can't wait for the first bell to the last bell. It's gonna be nonstop.
The event was also an opportunity for attendees from the smallest to the biggest fans to meet their favorite wrestlers, support them by purchasing merchandise, and get autographs.
The last time there was a consistent wrestling company in the Bronx was the Bronx Wrestling Federation, BWF, out of Darrow's Gym, right off of Whitlock Avenue, and that was it, and it was once a month. This is something that does not happen in the Bronx, and I want for Bronx people to be able to come to a Bronx wrestling show and see wrestlers from all over the world.
The win of the evening went to Bronx-born and bred wrestler Matt Awesome, who became the first We Are Wrestling champion after defeating opponents in an action-packed and exciting Rumble in the Bronx. He dedicates the show to a departed loved one.
She gave me the blessing before she passed to train. She got sick with cancer. She passed in November 6th to be exact. So this Sunday makes 6 years. I debuted literally a year after she passed. Ma, this is for you.
I wish we had more like this, but repping in the Bronx and for my guy who's from the Bronx is the best. I'd rather do it here than traveling out of state for sure.
This is the first of what I hope to be very many shows. In fact, I'm going to announce later on tonight that our next show, we haven't picked a date yet, but in the first quarter of 2023, we will be crowning our first ever champion here at We Are Wrestling, and it will be taking place here in the Bronx. The future is bright for We Are Wrestling, and I want it to be a Bronx future.
Tonight's event brought well over 100 attendees here to St. Helena's in the Bronx, which proves that wrestling is back and better than ever in the Boogie Down. Follow We Are Wrestling for more information. Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
This 15,000 square foot space is empty now, but soon it'll be home to a Black-owned and worker-owned knit factory, Katy, New York.
I was a former dancer, and we started making dancewear. That was our, and it still is, that was our original mission. But I wanted to build a new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility, which is what we're doing here in Hunts Point.
This wouldn't be the first time KD New York operated in the Bronx. The business opened a factory in the borough back in 1987. This new factory will be located at the Peninsula, a new development atop the former grounds of Spofford Avenue Juvenile Center in Hunts Point. Co-owner David Lee hopes this will bring a new era of development without displacement, environmental sustainability, and community wealth building.
I felt very strongly about community ownership, having a stake in the community, having a real place in the Bronx. We've been in the Bronx for over 40 years, and I thought that part of it was important. So as far as the employee ownership, that's always been a major part that was important to me.
They're going to do is they're going to bring worker equity, so workers will own part of the business. So of course there's an economic component. If the business does well, the workers who are also owners do well. But there's also a social component around democratizing the workplace. These workers can design their schedules. They can design important parts of their work around what they do and around their experience. So it's also bringing in what we call inclusive economic development to the borough.
Here I get access to media, access to an incredibly coherent, together workforce. I get access to customers. I get access to talent all over New York City. Here in Hunts Point, that's what I'm going to get, and that's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to build and see, flourish.
The garments at KD New York will be made of vegetable cashmere, a plant-based fabric composed of soy protein. We asked David what inspired this idea and about the process.
I've been a vegetarian or a vegan most of my life, and I started doing some research. We were knitting quite a bit in cashmere, and I started doing research on the sustainability of cashmere about 10 years ago, and I saw that this is not really a sustainable direction. And I started thinking, well, why don't you think about an alternative? What would happen, what it would look like if we were the leader in upcycling plant-based waste into new fibers, and if all of that happened in Hunts Point and here in the Bronx. And that's kind of what we plan to build here in this location, in addition to advanced manufacturing and making this the home base for KD.
So there's a social good from thinking about sustainability in fashion, but there's also a workforce and an economic development component around bringing those type of jobs. So when that type of manufacturing comes back to a place like the Bronx, it is our responsibility to support it and also to think about amplifying it.
KD New York seeks to provide up to 92 jobs by the year 2024, operating on a worker-owned model. They hope to become a leader in upcycling plant-based waste into new fibers locally here in the Bronx. Reporting for BronxNet, Sanji Lopez.
Thanks to all the great BronxNet personalities and videographers for all the hard work they do in the field to bring us all that stuff. We'll be right back here after this.
Is it time yet?
It's time.
Come start time for dinner.
Oh, turn it goes.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Man, it's lonely. Like, going through life lonely.
There is the therapeutic aspect of music, just expressing how you feel. I'm going to talk to Howie about his feelings, make it into a song.
COVID-19 has changed how we spend weekends with the girls. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to brunching instead of late-night munching. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it? Is it safe? Should I wait?
It's okay to have questions. Now get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Okay, welcome back to Open. Since the height of the pandemic, Americans have been met with the rising costs of everyday necessities like food, gas, and now rent. The organization StreetEasy has found that while rent in New York City has gone up, wages have gone down, leaving many New Yorkers struggling to afford rent. Joining me this evening, or this morning actually, to discuss this finding is the economist for StreetEasy. It is Mr. Kenny Lee. Mr. Lee, nice to have you with us.
Great to be here.
There's two ends, and if you don't make them fit, then you have big problems. Let's start with the rent part of it. Why is rent going up? I mean, we had a candidate who said, the rent is too damn high. Everybody would agree with that. What is the deal with rent? And I realize there are many levels to it, but what's your overall perspective on that?
Yeah, since the pandemic, rental demand has come back very strongly in the city. Unfortunately, supply has not. I think there are two factors that are really pressuring the supply. First of all, a lot of priced out buyers in the city are still waiting in the rental market for their chance to become a homeowner. Also, our data suggests that New Yorkers are paying up to avoid having roommates. That means there are fewer options for renters out there to score their future home.
It's interesting because of all the different types of housing that there are. And, people say, well, why doesn't my landlord just lower the rent? But let's be honest. The landlord's rents or the landlord's costs are going up for heat, for, everything, for construction. You say you want to redo the plumbing. Well, where does that money come from, especially if they're not raising the rent? So a little sympathy somewhere in there, while we appreciate that tenants are unhappy and feeling the pinch. Is there some sympathy for property owners as well who say, look, I'd like to do the right thing. Show me the money.
That is true. Inflation has hit New Yorkers very hard, and that includes landlords too. Utilities have been going up pretty strongly. Labor costs to maintain the property have also gone up pretty substantially. That means landlords have to, unfortunately, pass on the costs to the tenants as well. Also, expiring pandemic discounts have played a role. This summer, we identified that in Manhattan, about 44% of the rental inventory in the second quarter of this year were related to expiring pandemic deals.
Let's just go to the other end. As I said, the rent is here and the wages are here. Let's talk about the wage issue. New York has a $15 minimum wage. There's talk that by 2025, many of our elected officials want to get it up to $20. Somehow, I feel like we're not getting where we need to be because, you see people coming off the subway and they're going right to the friendly fridge because even though they're working, they can't make enough to even feed their families. It's horrible. Where are we at as far as raising not only the minimum wage, but other people's wages?
Of course, having higher minimum wage could help certain New Yorkers who don't make that much money compared to the rest of the city. But the problem is that the rents have been stubbornly high. In fact, in November, rents based on our StreetEasy data declined only $5. That's really just less than 2 subway swipes. And inflation has hit New Yorkers' wallet very hard. This summer, after adjusting for inflation, wages fell nearly 9% year over year. And that can be a substantial financial burden for many people in the city.
Can you just talk a little bit about the numbers? Excluding the temporary gap in 2020 due to COVID and the pandemic, New Yorkers are experiencing the widest gap since 2008, 14 years. Well, now it's 2023, so it's 15 years. But the gap appears to be much larger than the one experienced back then. What accounts for the discrepancies?
Right. The situation back then, when the city was hit by the global financial crisis, was very different. Between 2008 and 2009, wages remained relatively flat after adjusting for inflation. Also, rents actually decline around that time. However, these days, rents are up nearly double digit. Also, income has fallen substantially after adjusting for inflation. That has led to really additional financial burden for New Yorkers. A lot of people out there are just experiencing this lack of available inventory out there that fits their budget.
Let's just talk about the fact that we just went into 2023. The pandemic was the year 2000, year 2020. We're now emerging out of it. I mean, fewer people need to be wearing masks. People are generally healthier. We don't have the pandemic like we used to. I mean, people are debating the word. Why haven't we rebounded? You know, in other words, people back to work. Why haven't things rebounded since then? Is there a human element involved? Is there a financial element involved? Why is it that we can't just kind of, okay, let's get back to where we were?
The city has made a very strong comeback since the pandemic, but the housing market really hasn't made that comeback yet. The problem is the imbalance between supply and demand. There's just not enough supply, not enough homes available for all the New Yorkers looking for their permanent home. And the problem is it will take some time for the housing market to find a new balance between supply and demand. This is not happening at a pace that many New Yorkers are hoping for.
Mr. Lee, let's right now we'll nominate you for President of the United States. And as an economist for StreetEasy, tell us a little bit about how you would view all of this gap and all of the issues for inflation, and as well as what you talk about the high rents. What would you recommend that the current president do, or anybody does, to kind of put things back together so they make sense?
Yeah, that's a very tough task. I think the supply of affordable housing is very important for this current situation. The rental market is finding a new balance. We still see silver lining. The share of listings that are offering discounts are on the rise. Also, concessions are returning to the market, meaning that landlords are making more adjustments to their contracts so that they can fill up their vacancies. As we move towards a normalcy, the renters in New York City should be able to find better deals in 2023. However, the process will be rather slow because of very low inventory out there.
In the article, they talk about people looking away from Manhattan, and we in the outer boroughs, in the borough of the Bronx, are experiencing people saying, well, wait a minute, maybe the Bronx is a good place. Of course, we would always recommend that it is a good place to go. How could this movement affect communities of people who are already living there and also possibly dealing with the same struggle? And you're saying, well, wait a minute, you're going to come here looking for an answer. We ain't got it solved here either.
Right. StreetEasy's search data shows that New Yorkers are really trying to be flexible to find something that fits their budget. Rising rents have squeezed New Yorkers very hard, and they are looking farther away from Manhattan to find the deal. That means rents and also home prices could rise further in these affected areas. And that means additional financial burdens who are facing rising rents in their local areas.
We've had an eviction issue here, and we've had an eviction moratorium. The eviction moratorium was lifted, and now we're finding many people are saying, well, wait a minute, I really could be in trouble here. Where do we put that in this gap equation?
Yeah, it's a very tough situation for many renters out there. The current literature in academia suggests that high rent burden is strongly associated with rising homelessness in many metro areas in the country. I think the increase in affordable housing should be definitely helpful for this situation. Also, offering additional resources for at risk New Yorkers and educating about their rights to legal counsel can also go a long way.
You know, the finding that only 48.2% of all working New Yorkers earned enough to afford rent is really a striking number. Because then you look at more than half are unable to afford rent. Going back to the president question, if you simply raise wages, are we getting closer to where we need to be?
I think the problem here is that affordability is very relative, depending on what occupation you have. Not that many rental inventory might be available for those individuals. We found out that typical workers in essential industries offering support for the New York City, including transportation, healthcare support, were only able to afford 10% of the rental inventory this summer. That is 48.2% of 4 million New York workforce. That's really a great financial burden on these people. Unless they spent more than 50% of their income, they were only able to afford 10% of the inventory.
Just to conclude here before we have to let you go, Mr. Lee, is there a silver lining? Is the rental market, kind of rebalancing? Are we getting to a point where, just let the normal forces of the economy work and we'll get where we want to be? I mean, is there a hopeful sign here in this difficult problem?
One advice I have is don't let previous year's challenges let you down. I think there still is silver lining in this process. The process has been slow, but normalization is still happening. In November in 2022, about 22% of rental listings on StreetEasy offered discounts. That means landlords are resetting their expectations as the affordability issue really squeezes renters out there. As the market normalizes, renters may be able to find a better deal in 2023.
I think we're always hopeful that things will self-correct, and I guess maybe that's what my final question was about. Kenny Lee, the economist for StreetEasy, thank you so much for your input. We're thrilled to have you. We'll have you back. Let's hope the next conversation is this and say, wow, look what we did. But we do appreciate you, and we appreciate StreetEasy, and we appreciate you joining us on Open this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, listen, to keep in touch with StreetEasy, please go to their website at www.streeteasy.com or follow them on Instagram at StreetEasy. So we're going to take a break. Stay tuned for more Open right after this.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
You know it's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
You can now watch MNN, Brick TV, QPTV, and SIC TV on BronxNet. Tune in to BX Omni, Channel 67 Optimum, 2133 Files during most Sunday evenings. We'll show you some amazing content from our friends at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, Brick TV in Brooklyn, Queens Public Television, and Staten Island Community Television. Every borough represented in the Boogie Down. Epic partnerships for the ages. And catch our new Next channel, produced in partnership with MNN, 24/7 on BronxNet Channel 952 Optimum and 2138 Fios.
All right, welcome back to Open. The ability to browse the web is a modern-day necessity, and yet millions of Americans struggle to gain access to high-speed internet, not to mention in the borough of the Bronx. Organization Consumer Reports is currently supporting a public service and advocacy campaign called The Fight for Fair Internet, and they explore the challenges people face with their internet service providers. Please welcome Senior Policy Counsel for Privacy Technology Policy at Consumer Reports. It is Jonathan Schwantes. Mr. Schwantes, nice to have you with us.
Yes, good morning, Gary. Thank you for having me.
So why the struggle? It seems to be something that is really a necessity. You and I just were talking about you got to have your cell phone and be able to even get into the ballpark, and it's really a necessity. Many people are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, and they don't have that opportunity. Why can't we get everybody kind of on the same page for something we all need?
That's a great question, Gary, and thank you again for having me. I will start by saying we've known this for a long time. How important broadband has become to really function in 21st century American life. Everything from working from home, which became keenly aware of that at the start of the pandemic, almost 3 years ago now, but also students also learning from home, a telehealth appointment. You no longer have to go to the hospital. You can see your doctor online. So having a broadband, which is basically shorthand for a high-speed internet connection, has been absolutely essential to functioning. We see it as a public utility. But why is it so difficult? Well, we used to think of it as, do you physically have the connection in your home? Is your home wired for broadband internet service? We've known that, and that's still a challenge. It's certainly a challenge really in rural areas, but also in urban areas as well. But with the pandemic, we also discovered it became an affordability issue. Your home or your apartment may be wired for broadband, but if you can't afford it, you're not going to buy it. And so a lot of the work that we've done in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere is to make sure broadband, basically high-speed internet service, is more affordable so all Americans can get online, because it's not just a luxury anymore, it's a necessity.
It sounds like, in a way, it's a classic confrontation between, the little guy and the big guy, because the large internet providers, and I don't want to list them and call anybody out, but they compete, but they compete at really a high level. You'd think competition would knock the prices down, but they've all got a gimmick. So they tell you they'll sell it to you cheap for a year or free for 2 months. And then all of a sudden, you're back into the same problem. I'm guessing that this is where the fight for a fair internet campaign comes in. Talk about the campaign, who's involved in it, and what the objectives are to get us to a point where we can all afford it.
Great. I mean, my first reaction is I wish there was more competition. There is just not enough competition for like a wired connection in your home. Some would say, yeah, your smartphone can do it, but I challenge folks to really work from home entirely based on just from your smartphone. So the first answer is there's not enough competition, because we found that where there is, prices tend to be lower. But the whole goal of our campaign was to find out what Americans are paying for broadband service. And the way we wanted to do that is not by scraping their websites for their advertised rates, because you're absolutely right, Gary. It can get very confusing when you look at, oh, that's a great discount for a year. But is that the true price Americans are paying month in, month out? So we ask consumers, share your bill with us. We'll take a look at it across all internet service providers from across the country to get a general sense of what are Americans paying for broadband. And then the second question is, what are the factors that influence price? So if we can find out what leads to lower prices, maybe policymakers in Washington and state capitals can intervene to make sure Americans are paying less for broadband.
So you folks at Consumer Reports collected, as we understand, 22,000 consumer high-speed internet service bills. What did you learn about what people are paying, who's not paying, who's able to pay and not able to pay?
What we learned is $75 in general across all of these tens of thousands of bills, regardless of your speed plan. And we can get into that if you like. But in general, $75 is sort of the middle of the pack. So if you're paying below that, congratulations. If you're paying more than that, give us a call and see what we can do to get you a better rate. But I mean, That's generally what we found. We found all other sorts of things related to who's getting discounts and who's not. What are these junk fees that appear on some bills? Why is that? Why are you paying an internet infrastructure surcharge? It sounds like something maybe the ISP, which is shorthand for internet service provider, maybe that's some kind of government fee they're required to pay. Not true. It's a made-up fee by an internet service provider that they're passing along to consumers just to pad their bottom line.
You know, the city of New York put out these kiosks, and very useful, very helpful for some people. But, you know, that becomes a government expenditure. Either that or they've got to find a way to amortize it through companies, et cetera, et cetera. Talk a little bit. You mentioned the whole notion of urban America versus, rural America. Is this a government thing that maybe government should step in and say, you know what, we're going to figure out how to fund these things or coordinate the contracts? Or is it really a thing that we've got to figure out how to get the private industries to figure out how to do this? Because after all, they're the ones making the money on it. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, and Gary, I'm a lawyer, so I'll give you a lawyer's answer.
Good.
It's a little bit of as part of the infrastructure law, I was going to say last year, but now actually since we're in 2023, passed in November of 2021, there is 40-some billion dollars that's going to roll out to the states, hopefully this year, to expand broadband access and affordability in this country. And some of that will go to urban areas. But it is a tough nut to crack, because you're right, on the private side, these big ISPs are only going to go into areas that they think that people are going to pay for broadband, and they'll be profitable. So that leaves out our urban areas that don't have competition, or what, from what we found from our study, still sort of old DSL, which is really slow internet service, but they're paying just as much as if it was broadband. So that's a huge problem. And I would say a large problem in urban areas that we found is a lot of infrastructure not being upgraded to broadband in a way that Americans would consider internet they use. So yes, part of it is the government intervening, put more money to expand broadband access. But it doesn't solve the affordability problem in terms of, well, can we just have the government fund competitors? That's not always a good idea if there's already an existing provider. So something that we looked at in our study is, well, if we have a consumer that I call the stuck consumer, so there's no competition, they're stuck with one provider, but there's a general feeling they're paying way too much for subpar service. That's where I think policymakers need to really do some hard thinking about, are those consumers getting ripped off? Is there price gouging taking place? And what should the government do?
You know, there is an education piece in here. There's no question about it, because and frankly, I'm not all that technically oriented. I see an ad and they say, oh, you can get this speed or that speed. And I'm like, well, I don't know. It kind of downloads okay. I mean, I don't know. Am I getting cheated? And then I go into the Apple store and it's like zip and everything is there all of a sudden. And you're like, wait a minute. How do people know if they're getting a good deal or not getting a good deal on their internet speed and what they need for their own particular, services that they need, et cetera?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. We have a tool at Consumer Reports called How Much Speed Do You Need? And you just walk through your household of all the devices that are connected to the internet. It's not like when I was growing up, there was no internet. But now you got to count it. It's your TV, it's probably a couple smartphones, probably a couple computers, maybe your fridge, maybe your home security system. All of these things need bandwidth. So our tool at Consumer Reports helps folks understand how much speed do you need. Make sure you have enough, so you have enough speed. But there's also a second part to it. Some consumers are paying too much for internet because they're actually buying more bandwidth than they could possibly use. Take a gigabyte. I know we're not going to get into the technical details, but that's basically a lot of internet, 1,000 megabits per second download speed. For a lot of consumers, that's just too much. You don't need that much internet speed, and you're probably paying more for more service than you possibly need. So we encourage people to use the tool, think about it, and then also look at your bill and try to compare. Like, when's the last time you called your internet service provider and ask them if maybe they can give you a better package that is cheaper?
I guess I'm going to, in part, answer the previous question by telling our viewers that in your article, you go into detail about an interactive feature where readers can get a few stats about their ISPs. According to that, Verizon was the most expensive, reaching $216 a month for the internet. That sounds like a lot of money to me. What would readers be surprised about if they were to go through this and to learn about their ISPs and what they're getting or maybe not getting?
Yeah, with specific to Verizon, that's their price, and that's some of their high speed, their best packages, their gigabyte plans. But that's before the discount. So they'd be surprised to learn that there's actually very few Verizon consumers paying that $2 or whatever it was because it's so heavily discounted. And that's part of the confusion here. Now, it's all great. We're all for a sale price. We're all for a discount. But if it kind of blurs the real price of internet, and so it's sort of like everything's always on sale in that case, and it's confusing. And so for that, you might be surprised to learn that you could be paying a very different price than your neighbor for the exact same plan. And so that's where it's like enough of the shenanigans. Just make the price be the price. Get rid of these silly junk fees. The discounts are great, but there should be some, they should be available to everybody and not just new customers.
Yeah, and that's where potentially legislation could come in and say, look, set your price. That's what it is. As an aside, I'll say the airlines need to do something like that as well, but that's another dialogue entirely. So bottom line here, we just got about a minute. What are the next steps to ensure that people across the country have access to reliable and affordable internet? Let's sum it up.
Yeah, we have to make sure that, it's great that the federal government huge investment in broadband access and affordability, but we need to make sure it's going to places where it's going to have the most impact. It's great that, the pandemic was horrible, but now we have a lot more money for broadband, including programs that help low-income Americans afford broadband. The Affordable Connectivity Program comes to mind. So for folks to check that out to see if you can $30 each month, that's a good thing. But they have to keep going. It would be great if we had more competition in both urban and rural areas. And so it's a struggle, but we have to make sure, I hope, in the next 5 to 10 years that all this money that's being spent actually does some good.
Jonathan Schwantes, Senior Policy Counsel for Privacy and Technology Policy at Consumer Reports, thank you so much for joining us. Stuff we all need to know, and you brought it to us. We really appreciate it. Folks, to keep in touch with all the work Consumer Reports does, please go to their website at consumerreports.org or follow them across all platforms at Consumer Reports. So we have come to the end of our show today. I want to thank all the guests for joining us, and thank you, of course, our Bronx viewers for tuning in. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch the re-cablecast at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum Channel 67, Verizon Fios 33, or watch anytime on the web at BronxNet.org. I'm Gary Axelbank, filling in for Kib and Aline, who will be back next week. We're wishing you and yours a safety and well and a happy new year now and, of course, always. We'll see you next time. Good night.